those very early stories that my mom wrote for me and my sisters and my brother helped me to, I think, make that connection very early on. So when I started writing professionally, I started writing in the adult market. My first book was an anthology of writings by Black college students, which I edited. And I wanted to do that book because I went to Harvard, and I felt very kind of isolated at that time. And it was also a time at the university where there were a lot of protests going on in terms of hiring more Black faculty and things like that. So I, again, using my writing, wanted to create a network where Black students would be connected. And so that book brought together Black college kids from all over the country. And then I went on to publish a family memoir about 3 generations of women in my family and our journeys from the South to the North, but also, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually. That book was called Girl in the Mirror. And I really wanted to write for kids because, again, I was seeing this dearth of books that featured kids of color, but even more than that, the subject matter I felt was pretty limited and limiting. So, it felt like our books were pretty heavy-handed. They always had a message. They always, and I still feel that way today. I feel like there's a lot of room for us to diversify our own stories, even within this whole, diverse books movement. Yeah, we have more representation, but we also need to diversify the stories that we tell about ourselves and for our children, because, we are a multifaceted people, and we need to have that displayed in the stories that we share. So that was my background. With my first book, I Love My Hair, I wanted to I wanted to talk about something that was important for our community, but also to do it in a way that was kind of joyful and whimsical. And then with Bippity Bop Barbershop, to show that nurturing aspect of the barbershop and the father-son relationship. I used to get my hair cut in a barbershop, and so it was, it was a special time, and I kind of, I just wanted to depict that in a story. So that's kind of my background. Maybe that was more than you wanted, but
no, that was wonderful. I think you spoke about it, but really thinking about, like, a lot of your books kind of like highlight African American life and everyday, and really celebrate it in a way that doesn't feel heavy-handed, but incorporates those elements of an African American life. How much of yourself or others or your own experiences do you bring into your books?
I think I bring a lot. Like, for example, I Love My Hair was inspired by a game my mom used to play when she was combing my hair, and we would pretend that there were people who lived in my hair, and we would go around and make up stories and just really have fun with that process. And that direct connection isn't in the book, but that whole idea of using your imagination and having fun, and that, again, the mother and daughter connecting. So that was definitely part of that. And then I just mentioned that I used to go to the barbershop to get my hair cut. And then sometimes my brother too would cut my hair. And that was a way for us to connect as well. So just bringing that sense of, caretaking and nurturing with Black men, with each other, and also with women. I wanted to bring that in. And I have a middle grade novel called The Harlem Charade, and that was set in Harlem. And we talked earlier before we started recording about the changes that were taking place in that neighborhood and are taking place. And that book is kind of a celebration of Harlem, the history in that community, but also an acknowledgement and a question about who has the power to, shape a community story, their future? What do we want to preserve from the past? And, you know, how do kids play a role in that? Because one of the things that I would like to do throughout all of my work is create spaces for kids to not only see themselves, but also to activate, you know, their own imaginations or their own kind of connection with themselves and how they want to, you know, connect with the world and in a way that is, you know, powerful and that is true to who they are.
We're now seeing some of those shifts in the publishing industry actually starting to acknowledge, you know, the inequity in diversity within books that are actually published. Not just like authors or images, but also behind the scenes, the editors, the, you know, artistic directors, like all of those pieces. What are your thoughts around the importance of diversity in children's books?
I am really glad that some of the things that are happening are happening. Oh, I'm glad that all of the things that are happening are happening. I mean, I was really so excited to see the hashtag publishing paid me, because it's sort of been this quiet thing that I think a lot of us always knew that there was some disparity in like how much authors are being paid for one. And then, you know, creating that whole behind the scenes thing is good too, but we also have to figure out how just putting someone of color in a position doesn't always change the narrative, because I don't want to sound cynical, but I feel like sometimes the people who are selected are people who, I mean, they're doing good work, but they also are very comfortable sometimes for, you know, sort of the mainstream narrative. And so I feel like that it's good to have those people in those positions, because, you know, I believe that they are going to bring some diversity to those businesses and those houses, publishing houses. But I also want to get past this way we have of kind of anointing one or two people, and so that those like handful of people are the ones that are always kind of trotted out, or like, you know, given every award or given everything, so that you end up not having a diversity at all, because so I mean, again, I don't want to be cynical. I think there is some good to showing and having those people there, but I would like us to get past the notion of, you know, putting this one or two people or publishing one or two books is what diversity is. And I think fundamentally there needs to be an acknowledgement of our common humanity. I'm not espousing a we are the world kind of thing, but if you're always looking at people within a context of, oh, I need to do diversity, or I need to talk about anti-racism, and you put people in those boxes, you never really get to know them. You never get past those constraints that existed to make that situation in the first place.
Right.
So
I think that's part of it, right? The doing diversity versus, or I need to have this type of book on my list to say that we are diverse, versus like, what does the world need? What does the world look like? What do our readers want to read? Who are they?
Right.
How do we tell those stories and make sure those stories are out there? What is the difference between the publishing world or your response to your books from then to now?
I don't know. I Love My Hair has had such a long and robust life, and it's still kind of going, which is really awesome. I feel like, you know, like I said earlier, I feel like there are certain themes or certain, I don't know how to say this, like certain, I won't say expectations, that's too strong a word, but I feel like there definitely has been more consciousness around diversity but in many ways that consciousness has led to a consolidation of voices. And so I feel like when I first started writing, even before the kids' books, there was more room to do. I think we're getting back to that, but there were writers who were out there who were doing just such a Black writers who were doing a diverse, just so many diverse things. There was a Toni Morrison, there was a Terry McMillan, there was an Elin Harris. And I think even at that time, you started to slowly see this consolidation at the same time with, you know, the music. I mean, you had all these diverse Black bands, but then all of a sudden everyone became a rapper, everyone became a gangster rapper. And, you know, I just feel like based on what people's assumptions are about Black culture, it's sort of this cyclical thing. So it's like people assume this about Black culture and then they sell this thing and this is what becomes Black culture. And so I feel like in some ways the spaces have gotten a little smaller, even though there may be more representation. But the diversity, again, within our experiences, I feel like that has gotten a little smaller. So I'm hoping now we're on, with all of the things that are going on in the world, that we are at a point where we're ready to open those spaces up, we ourselves as Black people, and just say, wait a second, we're all of these things. You know, we're not this thing or that thing. We're all of these things, and all of these things. There's room for all of these things to be a part of our narrative, to be a part of the books that we read, the movies and TV shows that we see. So I think it's starting to happen, and I'm looking forward to that. So, and I think people like you, the work that you're doing, I think is very valuable because you know, for example, I did many years ago, I did a companion book to the Princess and the Frog movie. And that whole movie came about as a result of parents activating and saying, we want this kind of representation for our kids.
Right.
And if we can do that around getting a princess, then we certainly should be able to motivate an industry that functions on money, you know, to put our you know, money where our values are and say, no, we don't need another book about a Black boy getting shot, or we don't need another XYZ. And I would even venture to say we don't need another hair book. But I mean, you know, but I feel like we have a lot of power, and, you know, the work that you're doing is part of, you know, bringing what we want and what we value, you know, to the forefront, and that's important.
Thank you. Do you have any advice, or what advice would you give parents to actually act as advocates for getting books that reflect their children in their communities?
I think I think parents would do well. I mean, use whatever platforms you have to connect with publishers. If there's a book that comes out, you know, we've seen this happen many times where there are books that are coming out that are not reflecting what, you know, we feel or what readers feel is an accurate depiction, or something that is offensive. And so people speak to that. But I think even on a daily basis to say, hey, I really love this book about XYZ that you published. I'd like to see more of that. These books are not representing my family situation or my children's life. I would like to see more of these kinds of books, or, you know, however you want to express that. I think writing to publishers, and then even writing op-eds or purchasing, period, you know, making it known, I am going to purchase this book because, or I am not going to purchase this book because. And, you know, I think as we maybe do that on an individual basis, hopefully those things begin to kind of compile, and we have more of a presence with publishers. But I think that's a good place to start.
So you spoke about starting your writing journey in terms of writing adult books, and your most recent collections have been children's books. Do you prefer adult or children's, or you like them in a different, or you appreciate them in a different way?
Yeah, I love writing for kids because books when I was a kid were so meaningful to me, and they really helped me to kind of shape, I believe, who I was or what my interests were. And so I think books are really important for young people. And I like writing stories um, for characters who are of a certain age. I'm still very connected to my seventh grade self. And so I'm just, I like writing, in that context. But I also feel like there are some things that I do want to do in the adult world. So I'm sort of inching back that way. It's never an either or situation. So yeah, the children's book world has changed so much in that these books actually, I think, appeal to a broader audience than just children. So adults are reading. For fun, I read middle grade books. I mean, that is what I read for fun. I rarely am reading an adult book anymore. I mean, mostly because I'm doing research and stuff, but I also really enjoy, and the literature has gotten sophisticated enough that I think, it's an enjoyable read aside from any other research. But I think, even in the other media, like TV and film, you're seeing children's books playing an even bigger role in popular culture. So yeah, I think it's an interesting field to be in, and that you have a broad range of readers that you can touch.
Do you have a favorite book that you've written? And I know for many authors are like, that's like asking me what my favorite child is. And so maybe not necessarily a favorite, but one that connected with you in a time in a different way that others have.
I really love the Harlem Charade, because that time that I lived in New York City that we were talking about a little earlier, it was such a cool moment in the city. And also for me, where I was in my life, I had just graduated, from school. I went to law school, and I didn't practice law, but I got a job as a reporter at Fortune magazine in New York. So that was such a different time. It was an exciting time. So I always, that book I wrote sort of in honor of that experience. Although it's contemporary, it just, for me, was a way to, kind of pay tribute to that time in my life. So the Harlem Charade, I guess, would be really special for that. But like you said, all of them have some little piece or something that makes me just like, oh. And then there are ones that are like, and with all of them, I'm also like, oh, wow, I wish I could have done that differently, or I would have done this differently in this story. And so.
Absolutely. Are there how close to your original idea are the published works, traditionally? Because I hear the process takes a couple of years to go through the back and forth. And so sometimes the end product is not necessarily the same, where there are tweaks made. But do you find that your published piece is closer to your original idea?
I think there's always some component of the original idea. But that I always tell kids, you or young writers, that you can't be so attached to like the details and the sentence structures and things like that, and even your outline. I mean, I always make an outline when I start writing, and it just changes and evolves over time. This sounds crazy, but the story really does kind of take on its own life. And so as you get into writing it, different things will emerge, different ideas, different possibilities. So one example of that was what we were talking about with I Love My Hair, where, this game that I played with my mom with all these characters who were in my hair, I wanted to try to do that. I really did. And it just got so unruly and crazy. So that book took 3 years to write because it's a very very spare manuscript, but I had to go through that process of, starting with this big idea and just trying to get it down to the essence of what the story was about, because it was starting to lose that with all of these things that were going on. So, yeah.
Do you have any, or what are some of your must-have like children's books for a home library?
Oh man, I should have prepared. I should have done my homework, because inevitably someone will ask me something like that, and I will be like, and I'll tomorrow I'll be like, I should have said that. I should have said that. Oh man, I don't know.
Maybe not your top, but what are a few?
Let me look. Let me cheat a little bit.
Absolutely.
What are my, geez Louise? Oh, geez. I don't know. I'm trying to think like what I go back to. Right now, I'm rereading Bridge to Terabithia. I'm rereading Little House on the Prairie. I guess it's Little House in the Big Woods. I mean, although we see the problematic elements of that now, so I wouldn't say that every household has to have that. I really love Lucille Clifton as a writer. She did a whole Everett Anderson series about a little Black boy, and she's a poet, and I think her books are really beautiful. I also really like Jerry Craft's book, New Kid. I thought that was just a beautiful story, very touching and just so relatable. And Ezra Jack Keats's books, that little boy, I just love him. Is it Peter? I think that's his name. Yeah. Those are just some of the ones that I remember. I mean, some of the other ones, my mom had this series of books that she bought us. It featured, I don't even remember the titles of them, but it featured like a big purple monster and a little kid who was friends with this monster, and they would always go off on these little adventures. And I don't know. So just odd things come to mind, but I don't even know what the titles of those are. So
I know you talked about like the influence of your mom, her creating stories as a kid. Did you guys have any like literacy rituals or routines that you practiced as a child?
Both of my parents read to us when we were children. My dad, there's still stories that he read to us that I remember. And my mom would read to us. We were always very involved, and I'm sure parents do this naturally, but we were always very interactive with the story. Like the stories that I remember my dad reading, he always did little sound effects and things like that. I was a kid that I really loved books about food. And so if I was reading something like a peasant stew or something, or crust of bread, I always wanted to go out and kind of taste those things or whatever. So those are ways to extend the story. Like we had a Little House on the Prairie cookbook, and they were making snow candy, and without our parents' knowledge, we were trying to do this, but snow in the city of Chicago is not the snow that you want to use.
No, it is not.
To make snow candy. but a lot of teachers also use, for example, the Harlem Charade has references to actual places in New York. And even though we may not be able to go to those places, there's still a lot of virtual stuff that you can do. So maybe extending the stories that you're reading virtually, and doing some projects around that, or even things that may be similar in your own neighborhoods or households. So that might be fun to try. And those were the big things. We did a lot of, play in our household, very hands-on things, not always centered around books, but just things that really sparked imagination and curiosity overall. And so I think those are also really important qualities to cultivate in kids beyond just reading, to have that desire to explore the world and to, observe what's going on. I think those are really important qualities for both readers and writers. So
I feel like due to the shutdowns, we're actually starting to get back to that place where we see that we have more time to actually devote and get into actual play and taking the time to do those things as families, which is, a positive thing that has come out of, this. And hopefully we can continue to hold on and bring back those traditions. Are you currently reading anything?
I'm actually reading Harry Potter right now. So it's sort of partly research, but partly I never finished the series, and it's, there are definitely issues in that series, and I guess J.K. Rowling has had some things come out, but even within the series, the racial stuff, is kind of, I wish that there had been more representation of kids of color in there, but it is a really immersive story, and that is what I'm kind of taking away from it and appreciating it. It's a really good read during this time, just kind of escaping into a world. She's really good. Rowling is really good at building that world. So yeah, that's what I'm reading right now.
Okay. Do you have any projects in the works or anything new coming out?
I do. There's a picture book coming out in 2021, which is going to be illustrated by Creative Soul Photography. They're a husband and wife team, and they're known for doing these just really beautiful and elaborate portraits of Black children. So they will be illustrating that book, and it's sort of allowed me to go back. I wrote poetry very early in my career, so it's a very poetic kind of manuscript just about celebrating who you are. So that's coming out, and I'm working on several new books. I'm also writing a podcast called Opal Watson Private Eye, and it features a girl who is visually impaired in Chicago, and she has her own detective agency. So the first season of that has already been released. It was on Pinna, which is a subscription-based platform, audio streaming platform for kids, and we're just starting. I'm just starting work on the second season. So
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, that's been really fun to kind of do a scripted series, to be able to sort of explore and build some skills in another genre. So that's been really cool.
Do you feel like during this time of, let's say, COVID and everything else going on in the world, do you feel more creative?
I guess it's been, I don't know if I feel more creative, but I've been really busy. Okay. And that, I've been very fortunate that my work has really been consistent in that, I generally work from home. My writing is here, and then my publishers, we generally work virtually anyway. So um, it hasn't been that kind of interruption. And I think with everybody being home and everybody working on stuff, it's been more kind of active even
Right.
than normal. So it's been a busy time, but a good creative time. With the caveat of all the things that are going on in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, how can people hear a little more from you or see more of your work?
I do have a website. It needs to be updated, but my website is www.natashatarpley.writes, WRITES.com. I'm on Twitter, Instagram. Theoretically, I'm on those platforms because I don't do a whole lot, but people can certainly reach me there.
Okay.
I think my Twitter is at Natasha Tarpley. I think both of them are so that's how much I use it, but you can find me on both of those platforms as well.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. It has definitely been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me and for featuring the book.